Donald Trump just suffered some really bad news. A federal appellate court, the DC Circuit, said he can't construct his ballroom anymore. Despite the fact that he's torn down the East Wing, despite the fact that he's been spending the past several months building this military installation at the White House and this massive ballroom, a DC Circuit Court of Appeals today, minutes ago, ruled it has to stop and it can't continue. It ruled that it cannot be built without explicit approval from Congress, affirming a lower court injunction that blocked the construction. Now remember, the courts never said you can't build a military part. You can build a military part underneath the White House. You just can't build this giant ballroom. The DC Circuit says that Congress has not given the executive branch, quote, to authority to dramatically redesign, reshape, and reconstruct the White House, the People's House, to fit a particular president's desire. Now, the ruling is stayed for a period of 14 days so that Trump can eventually appeal to the Supreme Court. We'll see whether the Supreme Court agrees with him. But ultimately, right now, he can't build his ballroom. Follow along for more.
So a US appeals court has just paused Trump's $400 million White House ballroom / bunker / underground data center / gooning room. I think it's genuinely going to have a serious impact on the midterms, just visually. Because as if Trump and the Republican Party weren't already cooked enough when it comes to the midterms, like it's looking like an existential threat for them, they are going to have to be campaigning while the White House continues to look like a literal building site. Like, this looks like ass. It's ass that's not only costing $200 million more than expected, but also has $1 billion of taxpayers' money earmarked for its security. Each president is a temporary tenant, not the owner of the White House and its executive residence. Like, you can't get much clearer than that. I don't really understand how the Trump administration is supposed to argue against that, especially given that most of the talented Department of Justice staff are gone. It's a little bit late to get any approval from Congress on this. This is just further proof that while Donald Trump wants to be a dictator, he wants to be an authoritarian strongman in the United States, it's just not happening. Not only is the eternal strongman of the MAGA movement a quivering, gelatinous, decaying mess, he very clearly does not have control of the legislative system of his own country, which kind of dooms any attempt at authoritarianism to failure as much as him and his cronies would like to see it happen. Because Trump is now going to have to take his ballroom to the Supreme Court, which, while packed with conservatives, cannot be counted on to back him in every instance anymore. Like, I know people love to doom and gloom about how the Supreme Court backs the Trump administration, but they shut down tariffs and they shut down birthright citizenship. What are the odds that a majority of them are actually going to be able to argue for the legal and constitutional merit of Trump's golden gilded gooning cave that didn't get authorization from Congress for construction? Like, what exactly does the Trump administration do if the Supreme Court veto this? Can't exactly rebuild the East Wing. It's not exactly a good look to be going to war with his own Supreme Court ahead of one of the most damaging and precarious midterms for the Republican Party in recent history. This entire administration seems to just be deflating. You don't get the sense that they even care enough anymore to fight these legal challenges. They're just hoping that the Supreme Court bails them out. Even if the Supreme Court do sign off on this, it's still going to be a building site come the midterms, which is only going to make it harder for Trump to convince anybody that which is only going to make it harder for Trump to bring round voters that are turning away from him. Just my opinion, follow for more.
The White House Ballroom project has hit a major roadblock and is sparking a strong reaction. Well, in this video, we'll look at the court decision that paused the project, President Trump's response, and why the controversy is raising questions about the future of the ambitious White House renovation. All right, let's watch some of these powerful and eye-opening clips. Please don't forget to like my video, subscribe to my channel, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, guys, let's get into it.
President Trump's ballroom has been ruled illegal by the federal appeals court in Washington, D.C., and the president is not taking it well. He posted this very lengthy statement on Truth Social today, calling the ruling unjust, horrendous, politically motivated, and unlawful. And he said it must be overturned by the Supreme Court in its entirety. But I think what's most interesting about this post, besides its length, is that the president has started to shift his own talking points about this ballroom. I'm going to get into that issue in a second, but first, I want to talk about the actual ruling. It was 2-1, with the majority saying the above-ground construction of the ballroom has to stop because it's illegal for the president to just do what he wants with the White House property without getting approval from Congress. But the judges did agree with a lower court judge that said Trump can continue all the construction that's happening underneath the ballroom. The judges wrote, each president is a temporary tenant, not the owner of the White House and its executive residence. The president has no and claims no constitutionally assigned authority over that property, which is designed and maintained for the use of all presidents, current and future, and for the American people. Importantly, the majority in this ruling said they will put a hold on it for the next 2 weeks so Trump can appeal to the Supreme Court, which means construction can continue on the site until the Supreme Court decides whether it's going to take this case or not. Now, in the about 100-page ruling, the appellate court majority ruled the president very likely lacks statutory authority to construct this ballroom for 3 main reasons. 1, because Congress has full constitutional control over the federal property that the White House sits on and has full control of the funding of its maintenance and development. And Congress did not authorize the funding for this ballroom, even though Trump claims the funding is coming from him and wealthy donors. It doesn't matter, according to these judges. 2, they say Trump had no expressed or implied authorization for the ballroom construction from Congress. And 3, the construction itself on that piece of land is likely illegal because it's far bigger in scope than regular maintenance and minor upgrades, which is what the law allows. The majority writes whether or not a massive ballroom should be constructed is for Congress to decide and is not a matter for executive self-help. Now, let's talk about the president's new talking points. If you read his post from today, he is no longer calling it a ballroom. Now he's calling it a military center and saying that it's required for national security. He's really starting to play up this military angle now. Of course, we always knew there was going to be a massive military facility built underneath this ballroom, but that has never, ever been Trump's main reason for this construction. He has said from the beginning that this is about building a ballroom because he's so good at building ballrooms and because he says he needs more space to host lavish events for up to 1,000 people at the White House, and the old space in the East Room was just too small. And he said every single president who came before him has always wanted a ballroom like this. So the question is, why the shift in narrative now? Maybe because he feels like he has more legal authority to construct a military facility than he does a ballroom. And maybe because he thinks he's going to get more deferential treatment in the courts if he plays up this military angle and claims it's a national security issue. And the reality is the courts are allowing him to continue to build that military facility underground, but they are not allowing him to build the ballroom above ground. The federal judge who originally ruled against Trump, who was, by the way, appointed by President George W. Bush, a Republican, has a problem with Trump's national security argument. He said in his April ruling that it's disingenuous for President Trump to make the national security argument that judges shouldn't be able to stop construction at the White House because having this huge hole in the White House grounds is a national security concern. The judge in April said that's a national security concern of Trump's own making. The judge wrote, security concerns are not a blank check to proceed with otherwise unlawful activity. The lone dissenting appellate judge from today's ruling, who was appointed by President Trump, wrote that she disagreed with just about everything the majority decided in this case, including that she doesn't believe the plaintiffs even have standing to bring this case in the first place. The judge said the injunction issued today to block construction of the ballroom is a blatant abuse of discretion and an act of judicial overreach. President Trump said he's absolutely going to appeal this to the Supreme Court. So I'll have
Trump's ballroom got shot down in court on Friday, and he is pissed. Oh, is he pissed? The D.C. Circuit ruled that construction could not continue without the authorization from Congress. And the judges all put it pretty plainly. They said that the president is a temporary tenant of the White House, not the owner. Therefore, whether anything gets built is up to Congress, and Congress has the decision, not the president. But what I don't understand is why he's in such a hurry, why he's so mad about this, because the ruling was that the above ground construction could not continue, but the below ground, the below grade construction, that could continue. That was fine. And he's been saying this whole time that the ballroom is but a shed for all the military stuff that's underneath. And if the military stuff is allowed to continue underneath, then what's the hurry? Well, let's go through the evolution of these ballroom lawsuits, these freaking ballroom lawsuits, because each one is wilder than the last, and it reveals a piece of information that when you look at it sequentially, well, it kind of makes sense. So in July of 2025, Trump announces this $200 million ballroom that he wants to build, and it's all going to be paid for by donors, all right, not the taxpayer. And that seems to be the whole strategy where this whole thing started, because if taxpayers aren't paying, then that means Congress has nothing to appropriate. And with no appropriation, that means Congress doesn't need to vote on anything, and that means Congress can mind its own business. The way I interpret that is that whatever you're building must be very consequential to either our freedoms or to Congress's authority, or likely both. And I said as much in my theory, which I published on November 8th, stating that I believe a lot of these tech bros have been talking about automating the government. And if you want to automate federal operations or create a single digital platform for the government, then that means you need a supremely secure physical home for that system. And by placing it directly under the White House, you eliminate latency problems and you ensure that the President of the United States has direct physical control over the system's core. Because remember, it's about centralizing control. And so the first lawsuit comes on December 12th, when the National Trust is suing, saying that the whole thing should be declared unlawful, and they ask Judge Richard Leon to freeze this whole construction as an emergency in the meantime. But because lawsuits have a way of making people have to answer to a judge, 3 days after the trust sued, the administration was handing Judge Leon classified declarations stating what was going on underneath the ballroom. The trust had a very well-founded concern. They were afraid that if Trump keeps pouring concrete down there, that it could eventually dictate the size of whatever was going to go on top. And so Judge Leon turned to Trump's team and asked his lawyers just that. He said, if I let you keep digging, are you going to come back later and tell me that this particular ballroom has to be built because of the underground work that's already been locked in? He said, what? Us? No, oh God, no. We would never. The two separate projects, two separate funding. Like, don't worry about it. The design is reversible. In fact, it's still changing. Nothing is going to be locked in. And Judge Leon said, all right, you can keep digging, but if I find out that what you're building under there is dictating what's going up there, you have to stop the whole thing, reverse it, you're done. You're on notice. And so that was the deal, okay? Remember that. And then on February 26th, Judge Leon had reviewed the entire case that the trust had brought to them, and Trump wins the case. But it's not a technicality, okay? It's because the trust apparently had sued under the wrong law. So Judge Leon handed their lawyers a better argument. He said, forget about whether or not the administration had followed the right process before knocking down the East Wing. Ask instead whether or not the president has any authority to do any of this in the first place. And so they scuttle away and refine, and they refile it March 2nd. And then 9 days later, Trump loses the lawsuit. Because to Judge Richard's point, nobody in that courtroom could point to any letter of the law that would let a president demolish the East Wing and build a 90,000 square foot ballroom without Congress's permission. Because private money means that Congress doesn't have to pay, but private money doesn't mean that Congress doesn't get to say yes. And so the whole premise for having this privately funded was just eviscerated, which is when we see him 18 days later on Air Force One deciding to throw out the old razzle-dazzle. He whips out the old poster board with these giant AI renderings of the ballroom on them, and he starts talking about how this is not just any ballroom, it's a shed for the military installation that's going to be built underneath. Because now he's got to woo Congress, and so he's selling it, right? He's going, this is the safest building there ever was. Because, you know, a judge blocking a ballroom is embarrassing, but a military installation? Pff, now this is a national security emergency, all of it. And Congress isn't biting, right? Even the Republicans can see that there's no law that actually let him do this. And so while Trump's lawyers are appealing Judge Richard's ruling to a higher court, the DC Circuit Court, he decides it's time to amp up the theater. He's got to pull out the Teddy Roosevelt classic, the old electoral winning move. He's got to dodge a bullet. It's the evening of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and Trump is having a glorious time with all of his enemies when suddenly a gunman rushes towards the door with a gun to, you know, right before he reaches the doors, he is tackled to the ground and everybody scatters. Within, 20 minutes, every MAGA mouthpiece is on X saying that the ballroom's a necessity. Trump even finds it within himself to go onto Fox News and start proclaiming that this is what we all really need. Oh, and get this, the next day the Justice Department writes the trust's own lawyer suggesting that the dinner could just be held in the ballroom once it's built. And 2 days after that, Lindsey Graham is proposing a bill on the floor for $400 million to cover the ballroom and the military installation underneath, all of which Congress rejects, and Judge Leon starts getting pissed and says, this is not what we talked about. National security is not a blank check to be doing all of this tomfoolery, okay? You don't get to build whatever you want. Come May, Trump is out of options. They are now a month behind on beginning construction on the ballroom. He's panicking, and so he plays the Hail Mary card. He pulls all of the reporters over to the construction site. Buys them breakfast too, by the way. And he's walking them through explaining how this whole building works, how it's going to be constructed.
Again, the ballroom, it's necessary for the ballroom to be built with what you see over here. It's all knit in. The air conditioning, the heating, the drone capacity, the shield.
And there it is. The exact thing that his lawyers swore to Judge Leon was not happening is happening. The bottom depends on the top, and it's all knitted together. Meanwhile, the whole reason they were allowed to keep digging was because those two things, they said, were separate. Nay, they put on the record, swore were separate. And so obviously they're not separate. And he must really need to get this ballroom built in order to get anything running down there. And so I listened back to that video of him walking the reporters through the construction, and that's when I noticed something.
All of these columns, they go directly right to the roof of the building. And again, we call it a drone port. It's set up for unlimited numbers of drones. Purposely, we don't have any air conditioning equipment up there because we don't want anything coming down through the pipes. If anybody gets, normally you'd have a lot of air conditioning equipment on the roof. We built it all inside the building, inside the case of the building.
Huh. Flat roof, you say? Inside the building, you say? So I went back to the drawings that Shalom Baranes, the architect, submitted, and the numbers were a bit strange. The first floor starts 8 feet above the ground and has about 16-foot ceilings. And the second floor, which is where the ballroom is, has 40-foot ceilings. And when you add those together, that comes out to 64 feet. But the building is 72 feet tall. So there's about 8.5 or 9 feet left between the top of the ballroom and the roof. And that's across an acre of floor space, by the way. And the drawings don't say what's going up there, right? It's darkly grayed out. And there are some instances where it looks like the floor drops into a deeper space. I mean, they call it the penthouse, or at least that's what the schematics are calling it. And that's when I thought, what if the ballroom is the cooling tower for the automated government? I mean, think about it. High-density computing generates an enormous amount of heat, right? And if there's going to be so much data processing down there, you can't dump that into the soil or bedrock. That'll just insulate it, so it has to be carried out to the outside air. Evaporative cooling is one way to do it, but that requires those giant evaporative water towers and plumes of water vapor coming out, and it requires just constant water supplies, which is why companies such as Oracle are pursuing something called closed-loop direct-to-chip cooling. The coolant circulates through this sealed system, much like a car radiator does to cool itself down. So it absorbs heat through water, and then it transfers it through these heat exchangers and returns the water cooled, all without evaporation. But the heat still has to go somewhere, which is where these dry coolers, fans, and chillers come into play. And so if the data center underground is in a dense historic city, where is all of that ugly equipment going to go? Oh, I know! On the roof of the building that you put above it. I made a diagram. When the computing gets hot, it cools off with water. The water then gets put through this little transformer that then sends it to the pipes that go up through the walls or pillars of the building, and then get exchanged through the heat exhaust at the top, which then carries the cool water all the way back down and into the same system in that closed loop cooling. And if part of that facility underground is ready, like Trump says it is, and they need to start running some of that compute, well, then they can't do that until they have a way to cool it from above. Which brings us back to Friday, where Trump lost in a 2-1 vote affirming Leon's decision. The decision was just that Congress needs to approve before he starts building. Congress would require him to write down what he's building beneath the ballroom. And if that's infrastructure for automating the government itself, well, then the roof may be designed to stop more than just drones. It may also be shielding an automated government from the government it's meant to replace.
The judge tells Trump that he can't build his ballroom off of the White House unless there's a security reason for why he needs it. Trump decides that he's going to attend the White House Correspondents' Center for the first time ever in his presidency. KKK Caroline gives an interview saying shots will be fired at the event. At the event, they admit that there's less security than is typical for this high caliber of event for the type of people who are going to be there. After shots are fired, Trump immediately gives a speech saying this is why we need the ballroom. And today, the Department of Justice is saying that all lawsuits against Trump for this ballroom need to be dropped because it's clear after the shooting that we need the ballroom. Interesting.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before we get into today's topic, please don't forget to like my video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me what you think in the comments. Alright, Trump's controversial White House ballroom project has hit another major legal roadblock. A federal appeal court has upheld an injunction stopping construction, with the judges saying congressional authority, is needed before the project can move forward. And now, Trump isn't backing down. His administration says he will take the fight to the Supreme Court. Ooh, now this is where things get interesting. The project was supposed to be one of Trump's major transformation of the White House, right? But instead of simply moving ahead with the construction, the administration is now fighting a legal battle over presidential authority. Now, supporters argue that Trump should have the freedom to make changes to the White House, while critics say a project of this scale should require proper congressional insight. And let's be honest, this isn't just about a ballroom anymore. is about how much power a president should have to reshape one of America's most important landmarks without the Congress. Wow. So the big question here is, will Trump win this battle at the Supreme Court, or will the court ultimately stop the project? What do you guys think? What do you think? Should Trump be allowed to continue building the ballroom, or should the Congress have the final say? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and please don't forget to like my video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on your notification for more political commentary and reaction. Once again, thanks for watching, and see you all in my next video. Bye. Love ya. Mwah.